Hello, hello. I am back with the next recap from the 2025 Grenke Open. In this video, I'm going to be showing my round 5 game. I decided not to record recaps on rounds 2, 3, and 4, but I'll share with you guys what happened since round 1. So in round 1, I did end up winning that game. If you saw that video on this channel, that was a pretty long game, very back and forth struggle, and ended up being a very late game. I actually ended up getting back past midnight and only went to bed at something like 1 or 2 a.m. So in round 2, which was a morning round because Grenke basically had all double rounds, round 2 I ended up losing that game, which was very unfortunate. I feel like I didn't sleep well. It was just like a very off day for me. And yeah, I ended up just playing a very bad game and losing to lower rated player, rated around 2150. That was a tough game. I'm still going to have to analyze that game, of course, but basically, yeah, my tactics were not up to snuff for that one and just kind of blundered everything. Ended up losing quite badly. Then in round 3, I managed to bounce back with a win, albeit a very hard-fought win in the end game, but ended up winning that one to get to 2 points out of 3. And then in round 4, I was playing white against another player rated around 2150. So far, I'm just all playing down in this tournament. That game was a Rossolimo. I was on the white side this time of the Rosso. Tried to put some pressure on my opponent, but he defended very well, I thought, and that game ended up in a draw. So after 4 rounds, I was sitting on 2.5 out of 4. Really not a great result considering that all my opponents were rated somewhere around 2100 or around that range. So going into round 5, which was the evening round on day 3. So after this kind of long round 4 game that ended in a draw, going into this round, I'm on 2.5 out of 4, and facing another German player, Markus Boehme, who's around 2186. So yeah, at this point, I'm not like feeling great about my tournament, but there's still 5 more rounds to go, and I definitely wanted to bounce back. And yeah, I asked ChatGPT for advice, which, I thought was funny. And it told me that, I should try to take it one game at a time. And that if I did manage to salvage the tournament, then the comeback would hit harder, just feel even better than if I just had a decent tournament from the get-go. So I was like, okay, that's actually good advice, ChatGPT. Thank you. And yeah, decided to just try to take it one game at a time. Take a page out of my play in Reykjavik, just try to play without fear. I think for the second tournament in Grenke, after Reykjavik, I started feeling some pressure. Yeah, all of a sudden it was like hard to play my regular game. So for this game and from now forward, I really try to make sure that I'm playing my best chess and chess that I can truly feel proud of. So this game started with one knight f3. I went knight f6. Again, double round, so very, very little time to prepare. And I basically wasn't expecting this from my opponent at all, who I believe is mostly an e4 player, but also has, had some knight f3 games, but wasn't sure exactly how he was going to handle this opening. So he ends up just going for the immediate castles, like King's Indian attack style game. I castled as well, and now d4. So I played d6, and we're in the fianchetto King's Indian. Main move for white here would be c4, after which there's a ton of options for black, and I've had this position many times, of course, in my King's Indian practice. Here instead, white goes rook e1, which is one of the known sidelines in this position. Other moves include like knight c3 and a4, and b3 was always a big sideline here as well. But rook e1 is an interesting move, looking to play e4 without committing the knight to either c3 or d2. And yeah, I think black has different options here, but I decided to just go knight bd7. This is a pretty tried and tested setup where black is playing kind of Philidor style with e5 and c6. So e4, I go e5, knight c3, I go c6, and now a4. And I was pretty sure I still had this move in my notes, and indeed I did. And I was pretty sure the main move here was a5 for black, which I don't think there's anything wrong with this move. It's a very sensible move to kind of take some space on the queen side as well, not allow white to advance forward. But because my opponent was playing rather quickly and kind of blitzing out his moves, I thought like, maybe I should try to switch it up a bit and not just play into like the main line where of course he's prepared. But I knew that black must have like multiple options in this kind of position. So I started thinking and just trying to figure out like how can I try to just get a normal position here, where my opponent doesn't know like exactly what to do. So after some thought, I ended up playing this move b6, which is a reasonable move. The idea is to sometimes put the bishop on b7, or to even play for a slow queenside expansion with a6 and b5. The drawback of this move is that it allows white a hook with like a5, but I think at this point my plan was to play b5. And if white allows, I'll go a6 and then bishop b7, and then one day even break with c5 as well. And if white plays d5 here, I think the line in the game I was calculating was to push b4. White should take on c6, otherwise this doesn't really make sense. I'll go c5 if white just moves the knight. So dc looks natural. Let's say take, and white has to take the piece as well. And then I was going to continue c takes b2. And now if bishop takes b2, then I can take back on d7, let's say with the queen. And I thought this structure is quite healthy for black because I can attack the e-pawn, and then white's queenside pawns are also isolated. It's kind of like an open Sicilian structure. It feels like a knight structure, except white's pieces I don't think are well placed. Bishop on b2, knight on f3, bishop g2, I don't think are well placed for this position. And of course, if white takes on c8, well then I would take on a1, and we get a classic four queens situation. But to me, this looked good for black because I took a rook, so I'm up in exchange currently, and white has no way to checkmate me, right, with their two queens. So yeah, maybe I missed some detail here, but to me, this looked like black is up the exchange and should be winning. So that was kind of the plan with b6. But of course, white doesn't go for all these sharp complications. Instead, just plays h3, very normal move. And I think, according to the engine, the way to have punished this was to go d takes e5. And on de5, to now push a5. And so this I kind of didn't super estimate because I thought, like, if queen d6, for example, then I'll go bishop b7, defending the pawn. And next move I can go like knight e8 or maybe even rook e8 and then mess with white's queen with bishop f8 to follow. But if white starts with a5, my normal move here would be, let's say, to play b5. Well, then queen d6 is super annoying because bishop b7 I can't play anymore in view of a6. So this would be kind of the way for white to actually put some pressure on black. And it's not so obvious what black should do here. I was thinking like rook b8, but let's say queen d6, bishop b7, white shuts me in, bishop a8, then bishop g5, followed by rook a d1. Compy gives white a clear advantage here. Of course, during the game, this would not be so super clear, given that black hasn't lost any material yet. But yeah, clearly unpleasant pressure if black isn't able to slowly consolidate. So yeah, on a5, I would definitely have to figure out some problems here. Instead, h3 came. I went queen c7. Now I think black is more or less okay because white isn't getting this queen d6, and I'm kind of getting my setup in. So bishop e3, and here I went a6. And so my idea is to push b5. I want to go bishop b7 as well. If I start with bishop b7, then once again, a5 was kind of annoying. I don't want to take this one. And if b5, a6, I'm losing time because my bishop has to go back. Though maybe it wasn't that scary, but yeah, I decided to just start with this one. Just a very flexible thing. This is a typical plan in the Philidor where you're just using all your pawns on the 6th rank and then slowly advancing on the queen side. So here white finally goes d5, which he could have done earlier as well, but he decides to do it at this point. And I definitely considered playing c5, where we would get just a very close structure, like being a King's Indian player. I felt reasonably comfortable here, but I wasn't totally sure. I mean, white has the c4 square for the knight, so knight d2. White can bring the knight to c4, and then somewhere go rook b1 and b4, and really start hammering down on the queen side, a5 as well. So I wasn't totally sure about this. Instead, I decided to take on d5 because I felt like the structure here would actually be kind of nice for black. If knight takes d5, I'll trade again. And if queen takes d5, let's say bishop b7, I'm developing very actively. White has to go back to keep the pawn. Now knight to c5. Maybe something like queen c3. This was, I think, given by the computer here, where, yeah, there's some reason black cannot take on e4 with the bishop. Maybe there's some tactics with b4 coming, but during the game, this felt kind of unpleasant for white. Like I thought white might have to take here, but then d takes c5, I have the bishop pair, and I think dream position for black. So After d5, I just take, realizing that we're kind of getting one of these Sicilian structures that looked favorable. So my opponent goes e takes d5. And this is essentially a structure you would get from the Najdorf, but it looked like a really good version for black because white's pieces kind of seem misplaced. Bishop on g2, and then the two knights are not really where they want to go. White wants to have the pawn on c4, b4, and like push on the queen side, but here the knight is in the way. So bishop b7, just putting some pressure on this pawn. Queen d2, rook a c8, kind of developing, and now knight h2. So at this point, white wants to maybe try to build some attack on the king side with knight to g4. I was definitely feeling really comfortable in my position because I didn't think that white's attack here is going to be that dangerous. And in the meantime, I have a lot of ways to kind of continue to improve my position. And that's what I decided to do, queen b8. So now the queen is headed to a8 to put pressure on the d5 pawn, and somewhere I might want to play like rook to c4, double rooks on the c file, and just start putting a lot of pressure on white's position. So knight g4, and I thought I could take here, because I didn't think this g-pawn is so dangerous for me. In fact, it might even just be a weakness. But okay, it wasn't so clear how to follow up, like if knight f6, g5, knight g4, bishop takes b6, and yeah, I'm not sure what's happening here. So I decided not to take and just drop back knight e8. And the idea here is that I want to play f5 with tempo and then bring my knight back to f6, and then I'm controlling the e4 square, and my pawn duo in the center is quite strong. And as a King's Indian player, of course, this plan felt very natural for me. But white fights back, f4, f5, and now in case of knight f2, I think I was just going to go back knight ef6, and this position looked very pleasant for me. I don't want to push e4 yet because that gives up the d4 square, but with knight f6, if white takes, I can take with my knight, and then this knight can jump to c4, and that just looks very nice and dynamic for black. So instead, white went back knight h2. And I didn't spend too long here. I ended up going knight ef6, not really thinking I had other options, just thinking, okay, I need to fix my knight. Look for knight h5, knight e4 stuff, put pressure on d5. And yeah, I thought this was okay. But actually after the game, okay, Compy showed another interesting idea I could have played that I didn't really consider, was to take here. I guess I considered this move, but I didn't consider the follow-up. G takes f4, and now bishop takes c3. After takes, knight ef6. I think in my mind I would have been afraid of my dark squares here, but of course white's structure is extremely weak, and yeah, it's not obvious how white is just going to generate an attack here super quickly. I mean, I think this position is still complicated, but yeah, Compy gives black an edge. I want to go knight c5, knight e4. I want to take the d pawn. I want to double on the c file. So clearly black has a lot of strategic pluses here, but of course white has this darkster bishop, which is always going to be dangerous. And you can imagine bishop comes to d4, knight f3, knight to g5, rook to e7. If black is not careful, you know, it could end up going south. So that was a very interesting continuation. Probably if I had looked at it more, I might have gone for it, but I ended up just keeping more pieces on the board. Knight f6, knight f3. And now this definitely felt like a critical moment because white wants to play knight to g5 and knight e6, which of course is pretty annoying. I don't really want to go h6 here, mainly because the pawn is hanging, I think. D takes e5, f takes e5, and then bishop takes h6 is coming. Otherwise, maybe h6 would be perfectly reasonable. And I thought about knight h5 here, king h2. And I wasn't quite sure how to continue in this position, but this was probably the way to go. Like knight c5, if knight g5, I have e6 covered, so I can just go h6. And if bishop takes c5, I'll take this one. And the bishop is hanging, and I got g takes f4 coming, so white's king side is looking extremely weak. And if knight e6 anyway, well then I can take on g2, go rook e8 at the end, and this pawn definitely seems like black is going to be able to pick it up. So there was nothing really to be so afraid of here after knight c5. And definitely, I feel like I should have done that. But instead, I noticed that I can also take on c3 here, which I ended up not being able to resist, and I took. Because my idea was that although I'm sacrificing the exchange, I thought I'm getting at least one pawn back with knight takes d5. In some cases, 2 pawns back. I have the e4 square as well, like knight takes g3. So on b takes c3, I think my plan was to play knight e4, followed by taking on g3. But of course, white takes with the queen, which I think is more logical, just to try to keep the structure safe, given that white is losing the d-pawn anyway. So here I throw in rook c8. Hitting the queen, trying to activate the rook, getting another tempo, and I'm looking to take on d5 with the right piece, because if the queen goes to b3, then I'll take on d5 with the bishop. If the queen goes to b4, as happened in the game, then I wanted to, I was considering taking on d5 with the knight, but here I realized white can go queen b3 anyway, pinning me with ideas of knight takes e5, and so tactically this didn't look like this was working out for me. Maybe it's okay. I'm not sure. Maybe knight f6 I'm holding, but it looked really, really dangerous and suspicious with all of white's pieces now opening up. So I actually don't know if this exchange stack was really that good. I mean, I'm pretty sure it wasn't good because when I take this pawn on d5, it just kind of opens up all of white's pieces. And so things get very double-edged. Whereas in the previous position, white was kind of stuck having to defend this d-pawn. So I'm kind of freeing white a little bit here, which I think was not a great call. Maybe I should have followed up with e4, knight d4, knight takes d5 like this. I think this is the computer suggestion, where black is getting one pawn and has very, very good compensation. Like I think black is even slightly better here. But yeah, somehow I was a little bit unclear or unsure about allowing white to just blockade so easily. I, in fact, wanted to keep this diagonal open so that I could try to attack white on the light squares with like queen b7. So bishop takes d5, setting a little trap. If queen takes d6, bishop f8, white's queen is lost. So this, of course, would be very nice for black. But instead comes rook a d1. Now I played queen to b7, and I'm hitting the knight on f3. Computer gives knight h4, but that allows black to take on g2 and then take on c2 as well, winning the second pawn, which looks very scary. So white ended up playing the move I was mainly expecting. Rook takes d5. So just giving back the exchange, but getting the very strong light square bishop. So if I go queen takes d5, then knight takes e5, attacks my queen, attacks everything in my position. Things are opening up for white's bishop pair, especially white's light square bishop is super strong. So knight takes d5, and now queen takes d6, now that there's no queen trap as white has queen e6 check. Actually, I think queen b3 was stronger again here, just pinning me up. I'd have to go e4 to block white's bishop. Rook d1, knight f6, probably close to balance here, but black is up a pawn, so white has to kind of prove compensation for that still. So in the game we saw queen takes d6, and now originally I wanted e4 here, which, okay, I think is the most logical move. Actually, not e4. I think I wanted to start with knight takes e3, rook e3, and then go e4. And yeah, when I was calculating this, I wasn't sure what's going on. Queen e6 check or knight g5 first, but let's say queen e6 check, king h8, and knight to g5. And actually missed that I had this move bishop d4, which I think wins the game for black. Just somehow my calculation, I just overlooked this because I remember not seeing that the bishop can go to d4. Maybe seeing the bishop can go to d4, but I think what I missed actually was that, okay, knight f7 check, I have king g7, that's fine, but queen f7, I think I didn't realize that I have this defense with knight c5, where I defend my queen and my queen defends the mate. I'm pretty sure this is what I missed, because otherwise I think black can resign in this position, because there's no way to defend h7 without losing the queen. So, but except for knight c5. So knight c5 actually would win on the spot. So I got not sure about what's happening in this line. And so I start thinking here, and I end up playing rook takes c2, which is another candidate move I had. And my idea was to try and stop this knight from being able to jump because I have rook takes g2. So if white gives check and knight g5, I'm taking on g2. And after king takes g2, not knight takes e3 double check, but knight takes f4 double check. And it's not to win the queen on e6, it's to actually checkmate white's king on g2, no matter where it goes. There we go. So rook takes g2. Okay, king h1 is possible, but then I can go h6 and knight f7 check, king h7. White still can't take the rook. If knight d8 hitting my queen, I'm still having a square with queen a8, and I keep all the pressure. Queen takes d7 I think is just too slow, because I'll take on e3 here or take on f4, and now I'm threatening mate into like rook h2 check and stuff, rook takes g3 and so on. So this, yeah, should be good for black. So that was kind of the idea. I was also thinking after rook takes c2, so yeah, white just doesn't have any jumps with the knight. Knight e5, rook takes g2 again. And if bishop h1, I had in mind knight takes e3, where if rook takes e3, well, then I can go like either rook c1 check or e4 first, followed by rook c1. This I felt like I'm doing well. Let's say like knight g5, check, king h2, h6, and I defend against the smothered mates, and white's pieces are really bad. Bishop on h1, rook on e3, and so it looks tempting, but it looks tricky, but I didn't think white actually has anything special there. And finally, after knight takes e3, I thought maybe white plays knight to g5. This is the point of bishop h1, unveiling a discovered attack on the queen and threatening the smothered mate with knight f7 check. Well, here black would be losing if not for rook g2 check, which does mate. So once I saw this line, then I started feeling pretty good about rook takes c2, because I felt like, okay, it seems like a lot of the tactics are actually working out for black. So rook takes c2, white does give this check. I went king h8. I think the engine here was saying bishop f2 was the move white needed to play. Just a very slow move, covering the bishops, covering both bishops, so now I can't take on e3. And then it gets very complicated. e4, queen e6 check, king h8, knight to g5, and yeah, this is super scary. So I should also note, originally I wanted e4 here, but then, knight takes e3 followed by e4, but then check, knight g5. We discussed how I missed this idea of bishop d4 and knight c5. So I was mainly thinking about h6 here. And yeah, I wasn't totally sure what's going on after like knight f7 check, knight d6, queen c6. I'm pinning the knight, but I'm not really sure like what my next move is going to be. But it turns out after h6, white has something even stronger, which I wasn't considering during the game. Queen takes g6, which, okay, I don't think my opponent would have found this anyway, but it's like a very, very computer tactic with the point h takes g5, rook takes e4. Yeah, and f takes e4, bishop takes e4. Black has to give the queen to avoid getting mated, and then white has a queen and a bunch of pawns for 3 pieces, and looks like a good endgame for white. So yeah, funny continuation here. Rook first sacking the knight, then rook takes e4, and apparently black doesn't have any great moves here, because rook e8 check is a threat, rook e7, and so on. So yeah, okay, objectively, I still should have gone for this, because rook takes c2 was not as good, but white goes queen e6 check, king h8, and now he plays queen e8 check. And yeah, this one was surprising, because I just didn't see the point of this check. Granted, my opponent was in time trouble, so of course he didn't have, I think he had like maybe less than 10 minutes here to try and figure this out. But queen e8 really blows the game for white, because after knight f8, it's hard for white to generate threats. I'm still threatening stuff like e4 and knight takes e3 and so on. And I actually have another threat in the position that's kind of hidden, which is to bring the rook back to c8 and win white's queen, which is now lacking squares. So this is the real problem for white. Rook c8 comes back, and the queen is just caught. So he goes knight d2, which defends against a lot of threats. Rook c8 now would be met with bishop takes d5, where I'm not winning, I'm losing, in fact, because my pieces are hinging. So I go e4, blocking the bishop. And now I'm threatening both knight takes e3, followed by rook takes d2, or bishop d4, and rook c8 back, which is a huge problem for white. So he goes knight takes e4. This was expected, sacrificing the piece. So after takes, bishop takes e4, everything is hanging in black's position. White has ideas like bishop d4 as well to mess with my king. But yeah, this doesn't really work. Number one, I can go rook takes g2 check, king takes, and now not even fe4, queen e4, but rather just knight f6. So winning the knight on e4 for free. Black would have 2 minor pieces for the rook. In the middle game should be a decisive advantage, though with some work to do. But I realize much stronger is just a simpler immediate rook c8. where once again, white's queen is still trapped. And the only way white can really continue the game is like knight d6 with a double attack, but this is insufficient because I can simply take on e8, white takes on b7, and now I can take on e3 with either piece and keep an extra minor piece in the endgame. I decided to take with the knight. This just looked simpler. Rook takes, I'm sure, was also fine, where after rook to d1, I would just make some move with the knight on d5, like knight f6 or knight b4, and yeah, my rook is very active, but I thought knight takes e3 is stronger, just kind of keeping white's rook paralyzed and looking for bishop d4 as well. Bishop c6 was played. Knight d6 was also possible, but it's important to recognize that white is not even threatening to take on e3 if I move my rook away, because I have bishop d4. So I think I was going to go rook e7, if I remember correctly. And yeah, this stops bishop d5 because I can just take it, and then bishop d4 is my next move. So bishop c6 was tried. I go rook c8, attacking the bishop. Rook c1, bishop takes b2. Unfortunately for white, the rook just doesn't have a lot of good squares, and yeah, there are no tactics to hope for. Knight d6 was played. I decided to trade rooks because I'm up a piece. Knight c4, now just defending the pawn. Bishop b7, and knight b2. I thought this was the simplest, like versus a5, allowing bishop back to c6. Knight b2, just going after white's a pawn. The b6 pawn is poisoned because of bishop e3 check. So if takes, I just take here and keep this pawn alive, and yeah, it should be very simple conversion. So bishop c6, bishop e3 check, king g2, bishop c5, and here white resigned as now his knight is dominated as well, and he just has no compensation at all for the piece. So yeah, that was the game. I felt reasonably good about this one. Of course, the engine, finds all kinds of mistakes and doesn't like my exchange sacrifice or like most of my moves after that, to be honest. But during the game, I felt good about it. I felt like, okay, I'm calculating stuff. I'm seeing lines. I felt like I'm out calculating the opponent. But yeah, of course, it wasn't a perfect game, but sometimes you do need one of these like risk-taking games to kind of get yourself back into the competitive spirit. So after this game, I was definitely feeling much better about my tournament. Now moving on to 3.5 out of 5 with 4 rounds left to play. All right, folks, I'll be doing a video on each of the remaining rounds in the tournament as well. So do stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, liking, subscribing, commenting, and all that good stuff. And hopefully see you next time. Take care.